Okay. My name's Caz Stuart. I'm a filmmaker and I live in London. I started working in documentaries 25 years ago. I started working at the BBC, and at that time it was all about making inserts for programmes. I started on a youth programme. It was great fun, a lot of pressure for a weekly programme, and it was a very popular programme. And since then I've graduated up to making series of programmes. So from half hours to hours, travel programmes, entertainment programmes, game shows, programmes about heroin, prostitution, love, marriage. I've made programmes about all sorts of things. The project I'm working on at the moment is all about birth. Why 98% of women give birth in hospital rather than giving birth at home, which in my view is where they should be giving birth. There's a lot of fear around birth, thinking that things will go wrong, that it's going to be really painful, which it is, of course. And our whole way of giving birth has changed. So I've been interviewing midwives, I've been doing lots of research, and that will be a programme hopefully that will come out on the BBC. It'll be about an hour. Normally I get my work because people call me and they have an idea from a broadcaster, they're being commissioned to do something. And then they have a very particular transmission date. This is the first time that it's been my idea. So I don't know when it will be made. I'm making it at the moment, and I don't know when it will be released. So this is new territory for me. After 25 years, it's new territory, which is quite frightening. I've made programs which are very heavy documentaries, and I've also made game shows and, reality shows. I don't know that there's one which is easier to make. Is it harder to entertain or harder to inform people? It depends. It's probably harder to inform people because whilst you inform them, it always has to be entertaining. So entertainment and making people want to watch is absolutely crucial. You don't want to make a boring documentary. So the trick is, if you're making a documentary about something which is quite boring, is you have to make it entertaining, and that's a real skill. The style of my films are quite precise. I like things to look very beautiful, so I'm very careful with the images, how the interviews are set up. I don't like flabby documentaries which are repetitive. I like things to be quite succinct and fast moving. I very much enjoy the beauty of and crafting the film. The style of my documentary making reflects my personality in as much as I'm quite a direct person. I don't suffer fools gladly. I always get to the point of something. So if I've got an interviewee sitting there, they don't want to say something, generally I'll get them to say it. And I'm very persuasive with people. So I like to get to the truth of things, and I think that's reflected in my films. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm not a journalist, and there is a difference between the two. Obviously, I'm a filmmaker, and journalists work with words. So I straddle the world of journalism and filmmaking. Of course, there are journalistic aspects to what I do. I have to fact check, there are legalities, there are stories to be told. You have to do all of those things. But I work in the world of images, so that's what differentiates me, I would say. Also, I think as a filmmaker, you make things happen, whereas journalists report on what is happening. A filmmaker creates, a journalist talks about what has already happened. So a journalist wouldn't make a train back down a track, in Ecuador so that you can get the shot, whereas I would do that. I would make the train driver, or ask him nicely to back up the train, get the shot, and it's a whole different ball game really. Filmmaking has changed radically in the last 25 years, documentary filmmaking, principally because the technology has changed. So cameras are smaller, it's non-linear editing now rather than linear editing, it's like the difference between using a typewriter or using a computer. It's completely changed. You can be much more creative, and people are expected to multitask, especially young people coming into the industry. They're supposed to know how to edit, they're supposed to know how to use a camera. And whilst that brings a lot of pressure and long hours, it also brings a lot of freedom. my sort of mojo is to make films that make the world a better place. That probably sounds a bit pretentious, but if I can make a film that makes somebody a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit kinder, then I've done my job. A couple of months ago, I had a bit of a shock. I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my typical producer hat said, nope, I can't believe this is happening. I'm going to find a way around it. And I researched and researched and researched, like I would if I was making a film, and realised that no, I would just have to get on with it. So I had my breast cut off, and that's left me, although I seem quite jolly, I'm actually quite weak, but it's given me a renewed enthusiasm actually for filmmaking, because I think only once you've been through something which is quite difficult can you really understand when other people are going through things that are quite difficult. So it's given me more compassion, I think. Generally, I don't choose the subjects for my documentaries, the subjects choose me. And what I mean by that is that a production company will present an idea to a broadcaster, the broadcaster will commission it, and at that point the production company or the broadcaster will call me and say, do you want to direct this documentary? And that could be anything from breast milk to prostitution to how people react under pressure to liars to game shows, absolutely anything. So I never know what the next phone call is going to bring. For example, I just got phoned the other day to ask if I'd make a 1-hour documentary for ITV about a hotel for fat people. You have to be fat to be there, you have to be fat to serve there, and I don't know how I'd fit in as a director there, I'm not that fat, but I declined. I just have to explain one thing. The hotel is made for fat people, where they have full fat buffets all the time, reinforced chairs, and the people who work there are fat and have to be counsellors too. So it's a celebration of people being fat. And it's kind of not something that I think is a good thing or recommend, so I turned that job down. I wouldn't want to do that job. I think I'd be hypocritical to be encouraging people to eat when they're already obese. In my long career, that is the only time I've ever turned a job down. I think in documentary, in this country anyway, there are very few subjects which are taboo. Most broadcasters want to explore, especially broadcasters like Channel 4. But I would say the last taboo subject is suicide. It's something that broadcasters are not very keen on. When you talk about suicide, it often encourages people, I'm talking about mostly young men, to commit suicide. And despite the fact that more people in the world died from committing suicide last year than died in wars or any act of terrorism, it's still a subject that is absolutely taboo. In Mexico, where I live half of the time, they celebrate death. It's another part of the story of life. They celebrate with trumpets and music and flowers, and of course everyone's heard of the Day of the Dead. And that's reflected also in their culture. So documentaries and films are quite violent in Mexico. Quite often you'll see people being killed and, in quite extraordinary ways, as they are in the country itself. It's quite a violent country. This is something that we hide away from here on our screens and in reality. I have a piece of land in Mexico and I'm going to build houses there and a little hotel, and I'm going to build a school, particularly for women and girls, so that they can come and they can learn about all sorts of things, learning English, contraception, skills that they can use, and basically to provide a safe place for girls to come, because I do believe that if you give to girls, you give to the whole community. I think you couldn't choose a better career. It's incredibly stimulating, really rewarding, very difficult at times. You have to be somebody who can have periods of time where you're not working, but it's a great teamwork. Never think that being a documentary filmmaker is all about you. It's not. It's all about the people that you're working with. It's always a collaborative thing. But I would say find your passion. What's the area that you want to talk about? What's the area you want to tell stories about? And go to college if you can. And if you can't, learn how to use a camera, learn how to edit. It's not too difficult. And start practicing. Just get on with it.